of his own stars turned on him, walked out, sued him, or spent decades saying his name like a curse. This is the list Motown never wanted told.
No, I told you to get to walking. Now.
Number 12. Mary Wells. Mary Wells gave Motown its first true superstar moment with My Guy in 1964. She was the label's queen before the Supremes ever charted. Then, at just 21 years old, she walked away, turning down what would have been a fortune in future royalties to sign with 20th Century Fox for a reported $500,000 deal. Reports at the time suggested Wells believed her Motown contract was void once she turned 21. A claim the label disputed fiercely. Berry Gordy reportedly felt blindsided by an artist he had personally shaped into a star. Wells never matched her Motown success again, and she later spoke publicly about the financial cost of that decision. But she also said she never regretted standing up to Gordy on principle, insisting an artist should be free to leave once a contract's terms had run their course. She spent her final years battling throat cancer without health insurance, telling reporters that Motown's system left former stars with almost nothing to fall back on once the hits stopped coming. Fellow artists reportedly organized benefit concerts just to help cover her medical bills, a quiet indictment of how little the industry had protected her. Mary Wells proved that leaving Motown could cost an artist everything financially. But staying silent about how the label treated its people was something she refused to do until her death in 1992. At the age of only 49. Decades later, historians still cite her exit as the first sign that Motown's biggest stars were never as untouchable as the label wanted the public to believe. Motown's contract structure at the time locked artists into multi-year terms with option renewals controlled entirely by the label. And Wells's dispute centered on whether those options survived her transition into legal adulthood. Gordy's team argued the contract remained binding regardless of her age, while Wells's advisors insisted personal service contracts signed by minors became void once she reached majority. The legal ambiguity became a cautionary tale other Motown acts studied closely, aware their own contracts contained similarly murky language. Wells's gamble on 20th Century Fox did not deliver the sustained hits she and the label had produced together. And by the late 1960s, her chart presence had faded considerably. Still, she rarely expressed regret about the fight itself, framing it as a necessary stand against a system designed to keep young stars from ever testing their own contracts. Number 11. Kim Weston. Kim Weston never became a household name the way Diana Ross or Mary Wells did, but she recorded one of Motown's most enduring duets, It Takes Two, with Marvin Gaye. Reportedly frustrated by inconsistent promotion and a lack of quality material compared to Motown's top-tier acts, Weston left the label in 1967 for MGM Records. She later spoke about feeling like Motown operated a hierarchy, with Gordy's attention and resources concentrated on a handful of chosen stars, while others were left competing for scraps of studio time. Weston reportedly grew close with Marvin Gaye during their recording sessions, and some accounts suggest she was one of the few artists willing to openly question Gordy's business practices to his face, rather than through lawyers later. After leaving, she became a respected voice in the civil rights movement, famously introducing "Lift Every Voice and Sing" as the Black national anthem at public gatherings across the country. Weston's departure didn't come with a loud public feud, but her quiet criticism of Motown's favoritism system reportedly stung Gordy more than louder exits, because it came from someone who had given the label one of its most beloved and enduring records. She rarely returned to the pop charts after leaving, but she never once suggested she regretted walking away from a system she believed was built to keep most of its artists in the shadows of a chosen few. Her willingness to speak plainly about the label's internal politics, at a time when most acts stayed quiet out of fear, made her one of the earliest cracks in Motown's carefully managed public image. Weston's time at Motown overlapped with the label's push to position Diana Ross as its singular female star. A strategy that reportedly meant other established women on the roster saw their promotional budgets shrink, even as their records performed respectably. Weston has said she watched singles she believed deserved bigger pushes get quietly deprioritized in favor of whatever Ross project was currently in motion. After MGM, Weston continued performing gospel and soul material, eventually shifting her focus almost entirely toward activism and religious music, rather than chasing another pop crossover hit. She has said in interviews that the industry's hierarchy taught her early that commercial success and label investment were two very different things, and that Motown, for all its family branding, still operated on the same cold priorities as any other business chasing its biggest possible payday.
Here's something most people don't realize. Only about 10% of you watching will hit subscribe. The other 90% just watch and move on. You made it this far, so you're clearly not most people. Hit subscribe. Back to the countdown.
Number 10. Brenda Holloway. Brenda Holloway had a genuine hit with Every Little Bit Hurts in 1964, and she co-wrote You've Made Me So Very Happy, a song later immortalized by Blood, Sweat and Tears. But according to Holloway, she saw almost none of the money that song generated for years afterward. She has said publicly that she was never properly paid or credited for her songwriting contributions, a claim that became part of a broader pattern of complaints from Motown's female artists during the 1960s. Holloway left the label in 1968, reportedly exhausted by grueling touring conditions and disillusioned by contracts she has said she barely understood at the time she signed them as a teenager. In later interviews, she described Motown's business side as a machine built to keep young artists dependent, paying them enough to survive, but never enough to walk away without a fight over what they were truly owed. Holloway eventually stepped back from the music industry entirely for years, citing burnout and disillusionment with how she had been treated as both a performer and a writer. When she did return to performing decades later, she used her platform to speak candidly about songwriter exploitation across the industry, positioning her own Motown experience as a cautionary tale for young artists signing their first record deals. Her story remains one of the clearest examples of how a hit song could make a fortune for everyone except the person who wrote it. Decades on, Holloway has continued pushing for songwriter credit reform, telling audiences that her Motown contract taught her more about the music business than any songwriting class ever could. Holloway's contract, like many Motown agreements from that era, reportedly assigned publishing rights largely to the label's own Jobeat music company, meaning writers received only a fraction of the income their songs generated, even as those songs became standards covered by other major artists. When Blood, Sweat and Tears released their version years later and it became a massive hit, Holloway has said she watched someone else's career benefit from a song she had co-written as a teenager. While her own compensation remained comparatively minimal, she eventually pursued legal efforts to reclaim greater credit and royalties tied to her writing contributions, a process she has described as long, expensive, and emotionally exhausting. Holloway's experience became frequently cited in later discussions about how Motown's publishing arm quietly extracted enormous value from its artists' creative work, often with terms the young artists themselves barely understood at the time of signing. Number 9. Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard co-founded the Supremes and was, by most accounts, the group's original leader before Berry Gordy restructured the act around Diana Ross. Ballard reportedly clashed with Gordy over the group's direction, resented what she saw as blatant favoritism toward Ross, and was ultimately pushed out of the Supremes in 1967. She received a reported settlement of just over $160,000, spread out over years, a fraction of what the group's global success should have provided a founding member. Ballard later filed lawsuits against Motown, alleging she had been unfairly forced out and inadequately compensated for the role she played in building the group from nothing. Her solo career under ABC Records failed to take off, and by the mid-1970s, she was reportedly living on welfare in Detroit, just miles from the Motown headquarters she had helped make world famous. Ballard died in 1976 at only 32 years old, and her story became one of the most cited examples of how Motown's internal politics could destroy a founding member's life, while the label kept moving forward without her. Mary Wilson, her former groupmate, later wrote extensively about Ballard's ouster in a best-selling memoir, keeping the story and the uncomfortable questions about Gordy's role in it alive for generations of new fans discovering the Supremes. To this day, Ballard's ouster is treated by historians as the moment Motown revealed exactly how disposable even a founding member could become once the label decided a different face fit its vision better. Ballard's decline accelerated after her departure, reportedly compounded by alcohol struggles and depression that friends and family later linked directly to the trauma of losing the group she had co-founded as a teenager. Diana Ross, for her part, has largely avoided detailed public commentary on Ballard's ouster over the decades, a silence that only fueled further speculation about how much influence Ross herself had over Gordy's decision to restructure the group. The 1981 stage musical and later film Dreamgirls, while officially fictionalized, was widely understood by audiences and critics as drawing heavily on the Ballard story, cementing her narrative in popular culture even decades after her death. Motown itself has never issued a detailed public accounting of exactly how Ballard's settlement was calculated, leaving many of the specifics permanently disputed between her family, former groupmates, and the label's own historical record. Number 8. The Isley Brothers. The Isley Brothers arrived at Motown in 1965, already established hitmakers, and they delivered This Old Heart of Mine, one of the label's most enduring records. But the group reportedly grew frustrated with Motown's assembly line songwriting system, feeling boxed into a formula that didn't reflect their own creative instincts as writers and performers. By 1968, they had left the label entirely, going on to found their own imprint, T-Neck Records, and build one of the most successful independent runs in the history of R&B. The Isleys later spoke about the decision as a matter of creative survival, saying they wanted ownership of their masters and control over their sound, neither of which Motown's system was built to offer any artist, no matter how successful. Their success after leaving became a pointed rebuttal to Gordy's entire model, proof that black artists could control their own business without a Detroit hit factory standing behind them. Industry observers have pointed to the Isley Brothers' post-Motown independence as one of the clearest examples of an act that didn't just leave the label. They built an entire business specifically designed to avoid repeating what they had experienced there. Decades later, the group was still citing those early Motown years as the reason they never signed away creative control again. Their story became a blueprint that other frustrated Motown acts would quietly study. Proof that walking away from Berry Gordy didn't have to mean walking away from success. The brothers, Ronald, Rudolph, and O'Kelly, reportedly grew particularly frustrated watching younger Motown writers get priority studio time while their own compositions sat unrecorded. Despite the group already having proven commercial success before ever signing with the label. Founding T-Neck Records gave them full ownership of their masters from that point forward, a structure almost unheard of for a black R&B act in the late 1960s. And one that directly inverted everything Motown's standard contracts were built around. The label's own artists reportedly took notice of the Isleys' independent success.
Let me explain
with some privately citing it as proof that leaving Motown didn't automatically mean career suicide.
My name, son.
Contrary to what Gordy's camp often suggested to acts considering an exit. The Isley brothers went on to influence generations of funk and soul acts through their self-produced catalogue, a legacy built entirely outside the very system that first brought them national attention.
Cat looks real familiar. Now don't I know you?
Number 7. The Spinners. The Spinners spent nearly a decade at Motown, with only modest success, largely overshadowed by the label's bigger stars, competing for the same limited studio attention. Frustrated by what they described as being buried in Motown's crowded roster and handed inconsistent material, the group left for Atlantic Records in 1972. A decision reportedly encouraged by none other than Aretha Franklin herself. Almost immediately, paired with producer Tom Bell, the Spinners became one of the defining soul groups of the entire decade, with hits like I'll Be Around and Then Came You. Group members later gave interviews describing their Motown years as feeling like an afterthought, with the label's attention consistently directed toward its already established stars rather than developing newer acts. The timing of their breakout success, arriving almost the moment they left Gordy's company, became one of the most frequently cited examples in R&B history of an act whose talent simply was not matched by the opportunity Motown gave them. For decades afterward, the Spinners' rise at Atlantic was held up by musicians and executives alike as living proof that Motown's system, for all its hits, could also bury genuine stars beneath its own success. Bobby Smith, the group's lead singer, later reflected that leaving Detroit for Philadelphia felt less like abandoning Motown and more like finally being seen for the first time in nearly 10 years. That single shift in scenery turned a forgotten act into one of the biggest soul groups of the 1970s. During their Motown years, the Spinners were reportedly relegated largely to session and background work behind the label's marquee acts, a role that group members later said felt more like employment than genuine artist development. Some accounts suggest the group's contract was quietly allowed to lapse rather than renewed with any real investment, since Motown's internal priorities were focused elsewhere by the early 1970s. Aretha Franklin's reported encouragement to sign with Atlantic carried real weight, given her own history of walking away from a major label in search of creative freedom and finding it. Once at Atlantic, producer Tom Bell reshaped the group's sound entirely around lush Philadelphia soul arrangements, a stylistic shift Motown had never attempted with them, despite years of opportunity to do so. The transformation was so complete that many casual fans assumed the Spinners were a brand new act, rather than a group that had spent nearly a decade largely unnoticed under Berry Gordy. Number 6. Gladys Knight and the Pips. Gladys Knight and the Pips gave Motown massive hits, including I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Yet Knight later said the group was consistently treated as second tier behind acts like the Supremes and the Temptations. She has spoken openly about feeling that Motown's promotional machine simply was not built with her group at the center of it, no matter how big their records became on the charts. In 1973, Gladys Knight and the Pips left Motown for Buddha Records and almost immediately delivered Midnight Train to Georgia, one of the biggest hits of Knight's entire career, and arguably bigger than anything the group achieved during their Motown years. Knight later described the move as the first time she felt like a label was building a plan around her group specifically, rather than fitting them in around Motown's bigger priorities. The success validated years of frustration that had built quietly during their time in Detroit, where Knight has said she often felt like an afterthought despite genuinely charting hits. Her story became one of the sharpest rebukes of Motown's internal pecking order, proof that even artists producing real commercial success for the label could still be treated as replaceable pieces in a much bigger machine built around a handful of chosen stars. Decades later, Knight still credited the departure as the turning point that finally let the world hear her voice the way she had always heard it herself.
He said it would.
A truth Motown had never fully given her the chance to prove on her own terms. Knight has described Motown's internal culture as one where certain acts were treated as the label's public face, while others, despite genuine chart success, were kept in a supporting role behind the scenes. She has pointed specifically to promotional budgets and television appearance opportunities as areas where her group consistently received less than acts Gordy had personally decided to prioritize. The move to Buddha Records came with a reported understanding that the label would build campaigns specifically around Knight's voice, rather than fitting her into an existing roster structure. Midnight Train to Georgia's success proved that theory almost immediately, earning Knight a Grammy and cementing her as a solo force, independent of whatever ranking Motown had once assigned her. Knight has since become one of the most outspoken Motown alumni on the subject of artist treatment, frequently using interviews and her own memoir to detail exactly how the label's internal hierarchy shaped her career for years before she finally left it behind. Number 5. David Ruffin. David Ruffin was the voice behind My Girl and one of the most electric performers in Motown's history, but by 1968, his relationship with the label and with his own group, The Temptations, had completely broken down. Ruffin reportedly wanted equal billing as the group's frontman, demanding the act be marketed as David Ruffin and The Temptations, a request the other members and Gordy both refused. He was fired from The Temptations in 1968 after years of rising tension, but Ruffin refused to accept the decision quietly. He reportedly showed up uninvited to Temptations concerts, jumping on stage to perform alongside the group he had just been removed from, forcing security to physically remove him on more than one occasion. Ruffin later pursued a solo career at Motown, but without the machine built specifically around the group, his momentum never fully recovered. He spent years afterward publicly airing his grievances about how he had been treated, insisting the group's success had been built on his voice more than anyone else's. Ruffin's very public battle with both Motown and his own bandmates became one of the messiest and most talked about fallouts in the label's history, a feud that reportedly never fully healed, even decades later. Ruffin's stage-crashing incidents became industry legend, cited for years afterward as proof of just how personally he took being pushed out of the group he believed he had carried to stardom. A wound that shaped nearly every interview he gave about Motown for the rest of his life. Reports from the period suggest Gordy personally sided with the rest of the Temptations during the internal dispute, viewing Ruffin's demand for solo billing as a direct threat to the group-first model Motown had built its entire vocal group strategy around. Ruffin's replacement, Dennis Edwards, stepped into the lineup almost immediately, and the group continued charting successfully, a fact that reportedly only deepened Ruffin's sense of being made disposable, despite his central role in the Temptations' biggest hits. Ruffin's solo output at Motown included some modest chart success, but without the songwriting and production infrastructure the label had built specifically around the full group. His records never approached the commercial heights of his Temptations years. He eventually left Motown entirely in the 1970s, continuing to perform his old hits at his own shows for years afterward, often telling audiences directly that he, not the group name on the marquee, had been the voice they came to hear.
A gold tear should be placed.
Number 4. Martha Reeves. Martha Reeves fronted one of Motown's most beloved acts with Martha and the Vandellas, delivering hits like Dancing in the Street and Heatwave. But Reeves has said for decades that the group was systematically underpaid and underpromoted compared to Motown's other female groups, particularly the Supremes, who reportedly received far more marketing investment despite the Vandellas' comparable chart success. Reeves has spoken publicly about discovering that royalty statements she received didn't match what she believed the group's record sales should have generated. Though she stopped short of pursuing prolonged litigation, the way some of her peers did. She has also described feeling that Gordy's inner circle simply prioritized certain acts over others, based on personal relationships rather than pure commercial performance, leaving groups like hers competing for scraps of attention. By the early 1970s, exhausted and reportedly suffering from health issues tied to the stress of the industry, Reeves left Motown, later saying she felt like the label had used her group's hits to build its reputation, while giving comparatively little back in return. Reeves became one of the most vocal Motown alumni, advocating for artist rights in later decades, frequently citing her own experience as an example of the imbalance between what artists generated and what they were actually paid. Her willingness to keep telling that story publicly, long after the hits stopped charting, made her one of Motown's most enduring critics from the inside, someone who had lived the hits and still felt shortchanged by the machine behind them. Reeves has specifically pointed to touring conditions as another source of resentment, describing grueling schedules that she felt were disproportionate to the group's actual earnings once Motown's expenses and fees were deducted from their pay. She has said that Martha and the Vandellas were often booked into smaller venues and packaged tours, while Motown's top acts received larger individual bookings and better accommodations, despite comparable record sales during certain stretches of the mid-1960s. Reeves eventually became involved in local Detroit politics later in life, drawing directly on her Motown experience to advocate for musician protections and fairer industry standards. She has said publicly that her goal in continuing to discuss those years was never to tear down Motown's legacy entirely, but to make sure the label's full history, including its treatment of artists like her, was remembered alongside its undeniable musical achievements. Number 3. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye was Motown's most artistically ambitious star, and by the early 1970s,
this deadly mass shooting
he wanted to make music that reflected the world around him, rather than the polished love songs the label had built its reputation on. When Gaye brought Gordy the finished What's Going On, reportedly Gordy called it the worst thing he had ever heard, refusing to release it, and warning Gaye it would destroy his career. Gaye reportedly refused to record anything else until the label released it, an unprecedented standoff between a star and the man who ran the company. Motown eventually released the album in 1971, and it became one of the most acclaimed and influential records in American music history, proving Gaye's instincts right and Gordy's judgment badly wrong. The clash reportedly permanently changed the relationship between the two men, with Gaye increasingly resentful of the years he felt Motown had spent controlling his sound rather than trusting his vision as an artist. In the years that followed, Gaye grew increasingly vocal about wanting full creative control and fair compensation, tensions that simmered even as he continued delivering hits for the label. Gaye's standoff over What's Going On became one of the most famous artist versus label battles in music history, permanently altering how the industry viewed creative control. Gaye himself later said the fight was never really about one album, it was about proving he was no longer willing to let Gordy decide what his own music was allowed to say. The standoff extended for months, with Gaye reportedly refusing studio sessions entirely, while Gordy weighed the financial risk of releasing an album so far outside Motown's established commercial formula. Insiders at the label reportedly worried the record's political and social themes, touching on war, poverty, and police violence, would alienate the pop audience Motown had spent a decade cultivating. When What's Going On finally reached number 1 on the R&B charts and produced multiple hit singles, it forced a fundamental shift in how Motown approached its artists going forward, opening the door for more personal and socially conscious material from other acts on the roster. Gaye's victory in that standoff is frequently cited by music historians as the moment an individual artist's creative vision first proved more commercially viable than Gordy's carefully controlled hit-making formula, a turning point that reshaped the label's entire creative direction for the rest of the decade. Number 2. Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. The Jackson 5 became Motown's biggest signing of the early 1970s, and Michael Jackson, still a child, became the face of the label's future. But behind the scenes, the Jacksons grew increasingly frustrated with Motown's rigid system, particularly the label's refusal to let the family group write or produce their own material, despite their obvious talent for it. Joe Jackson reportedly clashed repeatedly with Gordy over money, creative control, and the family's desire to record the kind of music they wanted, rather than what Motown's songwriting teams handed them. In 1975, the Jacksons made the stunning decision to leave Motown entirely for CBS Records, a move that also cost them the rights to their own name. Since Motown legally owned the trademark Jackson 5, the group was forced to rebrand as the Jacksons for their new label. A public reminder of just how much control Motown had held over even its most valuable act. Michael Jackson later described the Motown years as formative, but also constraining, saying the label never fully trusted the family to shape their own sound, even as they matured as artists. The Jacksons' departure remains one of the most significant defections in music history, a direct rebuke of the very system that made them famous in the first place, and a warning to every act that followed. Michael carried that lesson with him for the rest of his career, later building an empire specifically designed around owning his own masters and publishing, something Motown had never once offered him. The name dispute became one of the most closely watched trademark battles in music industry history, with Motown retaining full legal ownership of Jackson 5 branding, despite the group's departure. A clear demonstration of how thoroughly the label's contracts protected its own commercial interests over its artists. Joe Jackson later said publicly that the family felt Motown viewed the children as products of a formula rather than as developing artists capable of shaping their own sound as they grew older. CBS Records, by contrast, gave the Jacksons far greater involvement in writing and producing their own material almost immediately. A shift that Michael himself credited as a major turning point in his development as a serious songwriter and producer. The Motown years remained foundational to the group's success, but the manner of their departure, and everything it cost them legally, became a cautionary tale other family acts studied closely before signing with major labels of their own. Number 1. Diana Ross. No artist's departure hurt Berry Gordy more than Diana Ross's exit from the group he had spent nearly a decade building around her. Gordy had reshaped the entire Supremes, sidelined Florence Ballard, and centered Motown's promotional machine on Ross specifically, believing she was destined for solo stardom bigger than any group could offer. But when Ross finally launched her solo career in 1970, tensions with Gordy over money, contracts, and creative control reportedly grew far more complicated than the public ever fully saw. Ross reportedly pushed hard for greater ownership over her own business affairs as her solo career grew. No longer content to operate purely inside the structure Gordy had designed for her years earlier. By the late 1970s, after Motown's move to Los Angeles, and years of behind-the-scenes friction over film projects, contracts, and control of her own image, Ross made the decision to leave Motown entirely for RCA Records in 1981, ending one of the most consequential partnerships in music history. For Gordy, losing the artist he had personally built the label's modern identity around was reportedly the most painful departure of his career, a final proof that even the star he trusted most eventually wanted out of the system he controlled. Their relationship never fully recovered, and for years afterward, industry insiders pointed to Ross's exit as the moment the Motown empire Gordy built began to feel like it was truly over, closing the chapter on the single most consequential artist relationship Berry Gordy ever had. Ross's push for greater creative and business control reportedly extended to film projects, including her role in Mahogany, where she and Gordy clashed over directorial decisions, and Ross's desire for more input into her own image beyond music. Motown's relocation from Detroit to Los Angeles in the early 1970s also reportedly changed the dynamic between Gordy and his artists, shifting the label's culture away from the tight-knit family atmosphere of its earliest years toward a more corporate structure that some longtime acts felt lost something essential in the transition. Ross has rarely spoken in extensive detail publicly about the specific reasons behind her final decision to sign with RCA. But industry observers at the time widely interpreted the move as her declaring full independence from the very system Gordy had spent his career building, specifically to make her a star.